Hello, hello, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Sunday morning class with Guy Finley. We had a little technical difficulties there, but we're happy to see all of you here. Welcome to all of you joining us online from around the world. We're always happy to have you, and for everyone joining us in person. It's nice to see the smiling faces this morning. My name is Leah. If you're new to class, our format today will be Guy gives about a 1-hour talk, and then we'll take a 5-minute break, at which time we come back and we do a live Q&A with Guy, and that's your opportunity to join the discussion. If you have a question for Guy, something happening in your life that you'd like his insights on, please be sure to join us for that part of class. We always learn so much from each other as fellow students. If you have any technical issues, questions, comments, for those of you online, please go to the chat area in your whatever platform you're on, and you can write those in there. Kate's behind the scenes, and she will be filtering those and passing those on to us. And for everyone in the room, please be sure and you've turned your cell phones off. All right, I think we're ready to get started. I'm going to read the key lesson and the talk title. The talk title reads, "Break through the unseen barrier that stands between you and the peace you seek." The key lesson: until the peace and pleasure found within us is equal to or greater than any consolation found outside of ourselves, then our power to be patient, loving, and profitable in every moment is at best conditional. Nothing better serves to sustain anger, frustration, and fear than being identified with a level of self whose life is founded, at best, upon the sands of passing circumstances. I'll read a second time. Until the peace and pleasure found within us is equal to or greater than any consolation found outside of ourselves, then our power to be patient, loving, and profitable in every moment is at best conditional. Nothing better serves to sustain anger, frustration, and fear than being identified with a level of self whose life is founded at best upon the sands of passing circumstances.
Good morning. And good morning to everyone joining us from wherever you are in the world and whatever day or time it is. I'm glad you're here. When I was listening to Leah read the key lesson that I wrote for the material we intend to cover today, I was thinking about something I would share with you ever so briefly before we start the talk. You know, before a boy or a girl learns how, for instance, to go in the ocean and swim and surf the waves and enjoy what at first is just a visual experience of something that's vast and deep. Before they can do that, they are drawn into those waters by the love they have of them and what in them is drawn to an experience that awaits that individual within him or herself, that they can't know until they go in the water. For the longest time, the love of truth is like putting your toe into the waters of self-discovery. You must learn to trust the love you have for it, as opposed to the judgment that something in you bestows on you every time you see that, in spite of the fact that you love the truth, you love the world more. You love yourself more. It's all you think about is yourself. So all you want is to please yourself, console yourself. And you will at some point come into a true struggle with that which has drawn you to study this fake love of self. And that self that so loves itself, it doesn't want anything to do with anything that challenges its kingdom. You must stay in between those worlds for as long as is required until you're finally washed clean of this whole idea that somehow or other, just because you can't do what you love yet, doesn't mean that that love isn't real. And I can't tell you how important that is, because you will 10,000 times along the road be tempted to fall into some form of despair because you're still a human wreck instead of being what you've imagined, improperly so because of what the love you have for this truth says you will become. Nice deep breath. Last Sunday, we looked at a couple important ideas that I want to summarize before we step into this material for today. And I would add that the material for today, if you enjoy it, I'm going to go into it a little more deeply on Wednesday, possibly Saturday, Inside Timer, and then certainly Sunday. We're going to examine this topic as deeply as it can be examined. What is this unseen barrier that stands between myself and the peace that I seek? Why is it that it's so elusive? What constantly comes between myself and those that I love? Between myself and what I love? Between this indescribable longing that one has for a peace that passes understanding, and how quickly one is remanded over to an understanding that understands nothing other than what it wants or doesn't want. So we looked at this idea, and do you remember we talked about this unknowable life? Do you remember this, I hope? Yeah. And I proved as best I could in the time allotted, as I will briefly cover now, an invisible fact that you have to see and feel in order to know is true, because it's not seen with your physical eyes, and that is that there is an intelligence that governs the relationship between all creatures at all levels. And that this intelligence is inextricably connected to this awareness that is a field in which all of these creatures live, and that in that field, supernatural, divine, as you want to call it, there is something that governs everything that every one of those creatures does, so that not one creature acts, not the starfish at the bottom of the sea that doesn't somehow affect the star that seems to be light years away from those oceans. That there is a relationship between all things and that which exists between us and what we observe. There is an unseen knower, something that chooses for those creatures what they do so that they can remain in this infinitely connected field, this quantum relationship. That's why Christ said that a bird doesn't fall from the sky, that your Father doesn't know it. That's why we speak so often of the fact that though unseen, something calls to that bird sitting on the branch, and it says, time to lift off. Time to go get a drink of water. Time to go find a seed. Time to go hang out in the shade someplace. There's no creature there thinking, God, I wish it wasn't so hot. There's just a relationship between functions and their fulfillment. And the relationship between function and fulfillment is actualized by something that knows the good of all those creatures at once and what serves the good of all those creatures at once. Do you remember we described this? That's a certain kind of knowing, isn't it? There's no self there. Or we could say there's a self with a capital S that oversees all of these creatures. And conversely, we spoke of this one thing. If you remember, I asked you, what's the one question you never ask yourself when surrounded by other creatures, other human beings, other conditions? What's the one question you never ask yourselves in those moments that determines the choices you make? Do you remember the question? I never ask myself, how do I know that you're wrong? How do I know that you're an idiot? How do I know that this moment shouldn't be this way? How do I know that it shouldn't be as hot as it is? How do I know that? Do you remember asking that? How do I know that this reaction I'm having, full of resistance, how do I know that that's actually a good reaction? And if you remember what we came up with, what did we come up with? We said, I know. Essentially, I know everything. And we also showed that we don't think to ourselves that I know everything until some small thing comes along and challenges this unknown, almighty, all-seeing knower in this unconscious nature that pops up just like that. Wasn't anything like that I. There wasn't one thing negative. There wasn't a problem at all. And then that part of us jumps out of this murky, dark, unconscious nature, and it takes command. By what? Command by resistance. By rejecting, refusing, denying anything that interferes with what it knows is true. Do you remember this? The one thing it doesn't know, though, that it thinks it does, is it doesn't know why it suffers. All it knows is the cause of its suffering, that it always knows whenever that suffering is there. That's all it knows. Yes or no? All right. So now let's connect last Sunday to today's talk. Have you ever thought to yourself, OMG, I have no idea what just came over me? Yes or no? You wake up and you say, today I'm going to be a loving person. I'm going to be patient and I'm going to listen to people. I'm going to give my full attention to every moment. I'm going to be mindful. And then you drop your cup of coffee on the floor. You ever said to yourself, I must have lost my mind. Why would I ever go and say that? What could make me do something like that? And you have these thoughts, don't you? Behind it all is this idea, I must have simply stepped out and nobody notified me that I'd left the house, so to speak. How about, yesterday, 2 days ago, a month ago, I did this thing and I really regret it now. I really regret what I said. I regret that I wasn't more kind, that I didn't act more encouragingly to people. Do you ever have those kind of regrets? I regret doing that, yes or no? Or the question, you ever call yourself stupid? How could I have been that stupid? I mean, really, how could I be that stupid? And more important, and this we'll cover more on Wednesday night, haven't you ever wondered or asked yourself, at least in one respect or another, how come I can't drop this negativity? I even know that I shouldn't be negative. I can't drop it. What's wrong with me that I can't drop? What's wrong with me? I hope that you've asked yourself that question, because most of us never assume there's something wrong with us, because inherent in the moment of resistance is there's something wrong with what I'm looking at and what it is doing to me in this relationship I have with it. Yes or no? So we'll agree, will we not, that there's lots of times when there is a constant factor to these points that I just brought up, and the constant factor is what? If I said this, did this, What was going on when I said and did that? Something gave me a choice to make, and I made a bad choice. But I didn't know when I was making this choice to hurt you, to hurt myself. I didn't know when I was busy going through what I was going through that where I was going to lead into this pit of pain or problems. How can I be unaware of a choice that I'm making when that choice ultimately turns out to be against myself? Do you understand the question? How can we be so sure when it's evident by the effect of our action that we were completely blind in that moment? How can I not know I am blind when making choices that create conflict with me and everyone else, not to mention express the conflict unseen in my own consciousness? That's the question at the moment. Everybody understand it? Let's bring up the key question. It'll phrase this better than I'm doing. Read along with me. How, I'll put this in the name of God, is it ever possible to choose against ourselves without thinking in the same moment of choice that we were choosing in favor of ourselves? I choose. Do you ever choose, you think to yourself, I'm going to get up today, I'm going to make a lot of choices against myself? That would be ludicrous, wouldn't it? And yet if you examine your day, and by and large, for the most part, there's no examination because we're so busy acting out the choices that are being made for us by something, that it never dawns on me that I'm sitting here at home and I'm a frazzled wreck. At the drop of a hat, I'm more negative than I was because of what they did or didn't do. And I never think to myself that the way I feel right now is the result of a choice. Is the result of a choice. Because it is clearly a choice, isn't it? But you say no. Well, you say I didn't have a choice. You left me no choice, yes or no? That's what we hear all the time. I'm the way I am because this person, this moment left me no choice but to be someone who chose in favor of myself by trying to punish or push you around or please you or whatever it was, only to find out downstream not one of those choices changed a thing. Do you see it? Yeah. And it also explains why the world is the way it is today. The world is the result of all the choices made by a consciousness asleep to itself that believes it can choose its way out of the last choice it made with another reinvented choice that hopefully will finally establish peace on this earth. And the nature making those choices knows nothing about peace because it believes it chooses in the favor of peace when the result is not peace at all, is it? It's just another problem. Foolish people, you watch the news and all these interviews and get all identified with everything that's being said, believing that at last they've identified the problem. Now we know the choice to make. And 10 million times you're told, this will be the choice. This will do this, it'll do that. And you go, thank God the choice is clear now. And then what happens? 4 years, 40 years later, another set of people hammering through the same conflict that's never been resolved by coming to new choices that aren't new choices at all because they're made by the same unconscious nature at work in this human being. Do you see it? I just answered everything you're watching right now. How can I choose against myself unless I think I'm choosing in favor of myself? Is it first of all, can you see that's something you never ask yourself? All I know when I get to the end of a choice that I've made and it doesn't work out, all I know is I need to make another choice. So I've written something for you to look at with me. It's a new terminology. I'm going to ask that it come up on the board, and then we're going to examine it together. We're looking at how is it possible I can choose against myself, believing I'm choosing in favor of myself. Right? We know we agree with that, right? It's called identi-fixation. It's a marriage of two words, isn't it? Now, the truth is the word identification is fixation. But we never see that whatever we're identified with, we are fixated on, because the whole sense of ourself depends upon whatever it is in that moment brings up in us what it does. So let's look together on the board at this terminology and its definition. Identi-fixation. Say it. Identi-fixation is the term that describes how it is that I choose against myself, thinking I'm choosing in favor of myself, because why? Identi-fixation, blinded by our unconscious identification with some image, idea, or belief that we are attached to and dependent on, until some passing condition challenges that particular sense of self. And then quite literally, the moment that happens, all of myself is fixed on this attention that resists anyone or anything it sees as the perpetrator of what's disturbed it. And once that identi-fixation is brought into play, it becomes instantaneously negatively aggressive. Do you understand that expression? Negatively aggressive? Are you not negatively aggressive towards anyone or anything that seems to deal a blow to who and what you think is true and right? Yes or no? And so all of my choices come out of resistance. Don't they? You say, not my choices are positive. I want this. You can't want something in a given moment where you're disturbed that isn't born out of the level of consciousness that resists what it does and then simply gives you another choice, another sense of self, something that is pleasurable to want, as opposed to the experience of not wanting the moment that you're in. Identi-fixation. Nice deep breath. We're going to look at this now. What are some examples of identi-fixation? First of all, how many of you can see that this might be a good thing to know? Because I'm so tired of, I wake up the next day, I look at the day before, and the choices I made didn't change anything. And then I look back 20 years ago. What did all those choices I made? Not only did they not change anything, but now I'm stuck in a certain field of possibilities that have no choices other than the ones that seem to be connected to the one that brought me to this moment where I'm not happy. So here's some examples of identi-fixation. Follow the bouncing ball. Some terminology from 50 years ago. Used to go to a movie. Back in the day, it was, I swear to you, I know that people think, what's wrong with you? I've got TikTok. I can make people's faces look weird. You go to a movie, and they would have songs. And there would be, and you were invited as the audience to sing in not to sit there like you do now. Family gatherings. They shouldn't be called family gatherings. They should be called family scatterings, where everybody sits and everybody's thinking about and doing whatever it is that their little iPhone or stupid little handheld instrument is telling them they have to check, make sure everything's in place. So here's 10 people together, not one of them even knows they're in the room, versus the bouncing ball. Everybody would sing along. You call it antiquated, I call it a decent form of civilization. So here's a family gathering. And everybody's there, everybody's having a pretty good time, but over there in the corner, for whatever reason, Louise is pouting. She's the elder sister of the 4 sisters, and the 2 brothers, the aunts, the uncles, and the rest of the mishmagosh gathered there for that family birthday or whatever it is. She's saying they're really negative. Mother goes up, what's going on? She said, you know Cindy? Of course I know Cindy. She's one of my daughters. Well, did you see it? Now, Louise thinks that everybody sees what she sees. Do you not think that everybody should see exactly what you see? She said, did you see it? Mother's saying, oh my God, what happened? No, I don't think I did. What? Louise says, she put the knife and the fork on the left side of the plate when she was setting the table. Holy cow. It's right out of Gulliver's Travels. They opened the soft-boiled egg on the wrong side of the egg. That was the whole point. Do you understand? And it was really about governments. It was really about what we're talking about. Identi-fixation. Could Louise drop that? What could have possibly happened? I remember sitting here, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, and we're a little short on staff for different reasons. And Eric, who is now sitting over in the corner, he's been kind enough when he comes, he unfolds the tablecloth over the book table. And I was sitting there, and he unfolded it from the left to the right. And Peggy always does it from the right to the left. You don't see the reaction. You don't feel the instantaneous conflict with somebody who's doing something the way they're not supposed to do it. And there's instantaneous negativity, resistance, yes or no? And out of the instantaneous reaction, the negative reaction, comes what? Seemingly, whether seen or not, a choice to judge the person. Louise has had it in her mind for 30 years that her sister always sets the table wrong. And she's even talked to her about it. But on the other hand, Cindy is identified with the way that table should be set, because that's how it was set when she went and visited Flo. I've been expecting some news of certain kind. Everything's fine. And so the doctor calls me, and I'm listening, and she goes, Guy. Now, thank God for God. I can't be deceived. I go, yeah, what's going on? What's up? Well, and if you were in my place, what would you be doing? This is it. Yes or no? Instantaneously fearful because of a tone in a person's voice. Turned out that she had upbeat news. She was just negative. Can you think of examples of your own where you had an instantaneous negative reaction to something? Who can give me a couple examples? Chris, I knew you would have one immediately.
Blinding rage.
Yeah, and even though Chris is special, how many of you can have instantaneous blind rage? Yes or no? Violence. Have you ever been sitting someplace and someone starts walking over to you and you're instantaneously wishing that if you could make yourself go invisible, you would? What are they doing? Barbara.
I'm not sure what you're talking about, but my thing is judging other people for how they raise their children.
Speaking of family gatherings, she said, instantaneous, troubled over how others raise their children. Like, yeah, because I know. Now, can I be disturbed by any of the things that we described ever so briefly, because we've got to keep going? Can I be disturbed by any of that unless what? Hold on. Your choices have been the wrong choices. How dare you unfold from the left to the right? There are people that will kill other people if they see our flag unfolded properly. Nationalism. You tell me, what's sitting behind that? What was the key word? Identi-fixation. What does identi-fixation actually mean here? It means that my sense of self is fully fixated on something that I am so familiar with and deeply identified with, how you should be, how that should go, that this should or shouldn't be this way. But I don't know that I come into a room already knowing how that spoon and fork should be on the table. Already knowing how you're supposed. Do you ever have reactions just the way people look? I know you do. I'm with you mostly. You can't wait to comment on how people look. Why? Because there's a summary judgment there, isn't there? There's no you making a judgment. That's the point. Every judgment comes out of identi-fixation. Because in that moment, something you're fixated on as to how people should be or how the moment should go, and when that fixation is rocked by something that challenges what you're identified with, instantaneous resistant judgment, and then the summary negative aggression. Trying to change people. Do you know why you're so busy trying to change people? Because it gives you a choice to make that you can make in that moment. Instead of seeing the way you are, you choose to see what's wrong with them, and then you're identified with the perfection that you see they should be, unconscious to the fact there can be nothing more imperfect in a human being. That's something, and this is a whole talk coming up. What is identi-fixation other than the crucifixion of the present moment by the past? Isn't that what identi-fixation is? The crucifixion of the present moment by the past. That's what crucified Christ, incidentally. There was no room in the world he came into, and quite purposely, that could allow for anything other than what everyone is identified with. You think that Christ was crucified 2,000 years ago? Christ is crucified every day by anyone and everything that looks at a moment and says, no, you must go. I must crucify you. And by the way, when you are judging others, though you do not see it, you are crucifying them in between a mind that knows how they should be, what you need to do to make them that way, and God willing that one day they finally die to themselves and are reborn in your image. Yes or no? Let's summarize some of this. Yes or no, this daily stress, this suffering, this pain, it's an almost endless refrain, isn't it? You know what a refrain is? Something that repeats itself. And because it's such a common recurrence, it seems to us in those moments, it's evident that the world, you, they, this, them, the world in that moment is set against me. I wouldn't be set against you if you weren't first set against me. Would I? Would I make it? Do you just some? And incidentally, you can set yourself against someone you've never even met. Can you not? How do you? I just know. Try to put it together. I know this false knower with identi-fixation, because that identi-fixation is the ground of the false knower, isn't it? Because how does the knower know? The knower knows because in the past it became identified with, attached to some idea, some image of itself, and the moment that was formed, and it starts being formed very early. Do you understand that? You're raised in a certain kind of environment, your culture, your financial background, the religious ideas, the way mom and dad treated problems, every last part of that was you watching something make a choice in order to deal with something that they felt they had to choose in order to change or escape. And so you watch alcoholics, you watch people who abuse food, you watch men and women doing all of these things. Do you think can you look and see that your mother and father made a lot of bad choices? Well, do you think your mother and father said, let's get together, have a glass of wine, eat some pizza, and make as many bad choices as we can make? Do you think that any human being would ever look at you and say, I wish you were never born? kind of evil, cruel nature would ever say anything to a child? And don't judge yourselves. I can see some of you going back in the past and thinking to yourself, geez, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Because a choice is made for you in that split second to take you back into something that you're identified with that you didn't know crystallized in you. And now that crystallized self sits there as some strange center of gravity that anytime any disturbance comes along, whew, everything collapses into that identity that is fixated, and listen to this, that is fixated on what it doesn't want. This is a stretch. I am fixated, well, you can see this, I'm fixated on what I want, am I not? Can I be fixated and identified with what I want without the commensurate sense of resistance to anything that challenges what I'm fixed on, and then I'm fixed on not wanting it? So that this identi-fixation belongs to want and not want, but we don't see it does, because when I don't want, I'm fixed on what I do, and when I want this, I'm never thinking to myself, I don't want that, and I'm caught in this whirlpool of thoughts and feelings that never see an end of themselves, because this unconscious nature that crucifies the present moment by bringing everything into what it is already identified with cannot see what it causes for itself or anyone else as it goes through its iterations. Take a nice deep breath. I'm going to answer a question in the second half of the talk. Somebody said, I wish you could make this simpler. Can't you say this more simply? In fact, I'll just answer it now. I can always do better. But there are things that cannot be talked about without presenting a big picture. So the resistance to confusion you feel isn't over what I'm saying. It's that you don't have space yet to see where it is that all of this is connected the way that it is. Confusion is always in levels. And so I fail to see how this is in this. And until I see how one holds the other, till I see how the branch comes out of the vine, there's no way for me to understand movement. There's no way for me to understand flow. Can't just talk about a vine, the beautiful Christ. Can't just talk about the branch, the human beings who ascribe to this idea they love Christ. In order to love what is true, you have to see the whole. And you can't love what is true without seeing the whole of something. Anything that you love without seeing the whole is you identified with the sensation of yourself as being a spiritual or religious person. When again, the facts prove that the choice made, I'm this kind of person, I'm a true lover of God, and then I see these godless human beings over here. And then the next thing I know, I'm sitting in judgment of them, failing to see that the choice to judge them couldn't possibly be this loving person, because a loving person knows better than to judge others. So we're blind all the time to a set of choices being made for us that we're not present to, because the identi-fixation ensures all I see is what I don't want because it's not what I do, or all I see is what I want because it shouldn't be this way over there. Please, you following me? It's a big picture. Now, part of this knower that doesn't exist, whose ground is what? What's the ground of the false knower? Identi-fixation. I want it in your head. That's all you suffer from. Can we prove that? Absolutely. We talked about this grand scale, this field, in which there is an intelligence that is connected to all movement and governing that movement, this true supernatural knower, the divine, if you want. On the other hand, you and I look and say, well, God, this life is set against me. You're against me. Now, can I be against anyone without having something in me prior to me suddenly realizing I'm against you, without me being for whatever I'm for, so that everything I'm against exists because of what I'm for? Yes or no? Yes. Life never is against itself. Life is never against itself. Now, you can see that in scale, can you not? Yeah. Even the wind that knocks the tree over. I was out on the golf course yesterday afternoon, This is the second time in my life it's happened. And this huge dead tree, it's been there for 20 years, right as we're walking up to the green, it falls over. It sounds like a immense boom. And the person I was with, he knows that I said this before, he said, one molecule shifted, didn't it? I said, that's exactly right. And yet, is the one shift in that molecule that drops that dead tree, is life against that tree? Or is life finding yet new purposes for that tree? And yet, when I'm negative, I'm sure you're against me. Aren't you sure that life is against you when things don't go the way you want to? You get the news, you get the call. Life is against me. I'm just getting started. It is we who are against life without knowing it. It is we who are against life without knowing it. Now the problem is, we don't understand how it is that we are against life, but I'm helping you to see it. We're against life because we don't want life to bring us anything that we don't, we don't want life to give us anything that isn't of our choosing. And we believe that's natural. But you see, if you could see it, and I talked about this on Insight Timer, I think, yesterday. Life brings me this moment, it seems set against me. It's not set against me. It is determined to invite me through the revelation of that disturbance, if I could use it, to see, you know what? I'm set against any moment that isn't the way I want it to be. And I believe that the me that feels that life is against me is really me. When it isn't me at all, is it? It's the past crucifying the present, which incidentally, the past can't really crucify the present. What the past crucifies is your potential and possibility of entering into the present moment with clarity enough to see you're being shown something about yourself you don't know, and now you need to choose to be on the side of that revelation, not what you think is being taken from you. Do you see it? Anything that challenges my idea of how things should unfold. And again, I have to just touch on this. I hope you could follow me. Have you ever sitting someplace and you're kind of merry, quite contrary, how does your garden grow? Do you remember that? And the phone can ring. Do you ever wish the phone didn't ring? Or how many of you wish someone would call you? When Patricia and I first moved up here, without going into the circumstances, we literally left the world to come here. Everyone and everything. Not so much that we left them, but we were kind of exorcised, canceled. And we used to go to the post office, to the mailbox, open it with great expectations. Even a bill would be welcome, because then I would exist. I'm not getting any calls. It's just me and Squirt in this little room someplace, hoping to be recognized by something instead of outcast and alone. Now I wish that no one called me, and I never saw another piece of mail as long as I lived. Now, in those moments that come along, and I have a summary resistance, what's been disturbed? This is how subtle identi-fixation is. I'm in a flow I don't know I'm in. Meaning my mind is working on something, it's got thoughts going, it's chugging along, it's kind of clarifying a choice that it made or that it has to make new, and I'm a busy person. Some of you are so busy it's terrifying. I'm a busy person. Now where am I busy? I'm not just chewing my food. One day you have to see that you chew your food at the speed that your thoughts are moving through you. You actually need to see that one day, because you'll see, my God, I'm not eating and I'm not thinking. I'm in a machine that is busy doing what this machine does. That's me. The minute you see that, you have a choice, don't you? But the choice was made for you prior to that moment, which was to churn and churn and burn and burn. And then there you are in some kind of static suffering state. And God forbid that anyone should come along and interfere your identification with something that is messing with your mind even as you're going through it. Because now there's resistance, not towards what you were thinking about, but towards the one who interfered with your resistance. Can you make the leap? Can I know how any moment is supposed to be unless I first imagined and then identified with that image? Can I know how any moment should be? So any moment where I'm sure it shouldn't be like this, or that it has to go that way, it has to be because something has come up into that moment, triggered by some impression, something that has come along, and in that split second, something in me feels threatened by what is taking place that shouldn't be taking place, and there's no such thing as something that shouldn't be taking place, causing that kind of pain, unless I'm identi-fixation with imagination. Now we're adding identi-fixation with imagination. Write the term down. Identi-fixation with imagination. It's not complicated. An example, we've talked about this before. There's no such thing as psychological fear without negative imagination. No such thing as psychological fear without negative imagination. Now, negative imagination alone doesn't create the fear. It can't. Negative imagination only produces a fear when I become identified with the sense of self produced through that negative imagination. Do you see it, please? Yes or no? It is impossible to resist any moment, let alone feel trapped in a negative reaction without knowing in advance the meaning of the moment that I'm resisting. Can you see that much? Now, we painted a picture. Let's look at it from a slightly larger angle. This identification, this identi-fixation, what does it do to any moment in which suddenly that sense of self floods to the surface? What does any identi-fixation do in that moment? Anybody?
Makes us blind.
Chris said it blinds us. Of course it blinds us. What does it blind us to?
Bigger picture.
It blinds us to any other possibility. So imagine the moment, this field of awareness with all the content as a kind of a quantum field of possibilities. You can do that, can't you? Meaning nothing's set, everything is in a quantum flux. Everything is more or less just there as possibilities, determined by what it is that coalesces these possibilities into the momentary singularity that happens when these energies are brought together and something is formulated from them. Is that too complicated to understand? Is it? So here's all of these possibilities, and boom, every possibility instantaneously reduced to a singularity. And a singularity that by its collapse has produced the end of any other choices except for what? Whatever that singularity is drawn to through association. So that the only thing that sense of self can do when it collapses into this field of, and by the way, when that collapse takes place, this sense of self suddenly is there that knows that should be. What is that singularity that it is collapsed into, if you can follow me? Isn't it this? All it has are the choices, what I don't want and what I want. So that every choice is connected to only what it knows to want and to not want. Can you see that much? And where does it take what it wants or doesn't want from? Here it is, the whole field of possibilities collapsed into a single painful state of self that only knows to measure that moment through choices of want and not want. And where does that collapsed self get what it wants and not wants from? Where does it get it from? Another field that's collapsed. Are you getting the picture? Things get smaller and smaller and smaller. And the smaller they get, the more I resist the very thing that I'm creating without knowing it by being an unconscious human being captured with identi-fixation. I'm trying to give you pictures so that you can see and feel this. Are you able to? So that this identi-fixation is the collapse of all other possibilities. Bring up the second key lesson, please. Read along with me. No condition in and of itself is ever the cause of psychological stress, fear, or regret. Suffering of this kind is inherent in an unseen, unconscious level of self that resists changing conditions because, and what does it say? It is incapable of changing with them. Back to the true knower, the divine. Is there anything that happens? Is there one ray of sunlight that comes into this world that doesn't change everything that it touches? And why? Because it is created to change by that touch itself. So here comes life. You may not like it. Here comes that person, and you're touchy, but not in the right way. You're touchy. Now, why am I touchy? Because something is acting on me that is wrong. You're wrong. Do you think I would ever be this negative, this angry? Remember the list of things we started with? Would I ever be this enraged if I didn't know I was right and that you were wrong? Am I right? If I'm not there in the moment, who's right and who's wrong? This identi-fixation, this sense of self that is a captive of the past, that brings itself into every moment as quickly as it can whenever anything about the moment threatens what it is identified with and fixated on. Do you know people? I do. If things aren't the way they want them, life's not worth living. Do you know people like that? Look in the mirror. I'll only go here under these circumstances. I won't eat this kind of food unless it's like that. The weather should never be this way. It should certainly never be like it is right now. On and on it goes. An endless string of constant complaints created by what? Me, who knows how life should be. And that me is sitting there, the most miserable creature that ever lived, believing that the misery is visited on it by a world that isn't the way it's supposed to be. And how do I know it's not supposed to be that way? What's the word? Do you think we're getting anywhere with this? So here's a story, summary, and going into the exercise. Imagine a man, and he's visited, as it were, by a friend. And they haven't seen each other for a long, long time. And this friend is trying to, you ever seen something or heard something? Have you ever been around somebody where you think to yourself, well, this person not at all like what I remember them being? You know? It's rare, but from time to time. And he's looking at his friend, and he says, I got to say something to you, because you were like the most ambitious person that ever lived. And there was nobody that gave yourself as much as you gave yourself. Honestly, I was quite jealous that you could do that. But now, not only are you living what seems to be a more simple life, you've kind of, I don't know what they call it, you scaled down. Not have you scaled down, but you just seem to be a happier person. And he said, as a matter of fact, I am. Well, what happened? He said, it's hard to explain, and I don't really want to go into it. Please, he said, I want to know, because I said something about you I would like to know myself. He said, well, you said it aloud. He said, there was, for many, many years, there was no way, I couldn't get enough. No matter what it wasn't enough. I had things I didn't need stacked upon things I didn't need. And then I wanted more. And I felt insecure and afraid, actually, if I didn't have exactly what I needed when I needed it. Does it ring a bell at all? Well, I get it. So what happened? You stopped doing that? No, he said, I started to see that, and then I thought to myself, I couldn't get enough of that. And then I tried to deny myself. I read some spiritual books. I went and meditated, and I drank terrible tasting drinks of some kind. God only knows what they were made from. And then I worked. There wasn't enough. I couldn't deny myself enough. Well, he said, well, did that do it? He said, no, not at all. Well, I don't understand where you're going. You couldn't get enough of what you want, and then you couldn't get enough of denying yourself what you want. What was the solution? The man said, well, the truth is, he said, I didn't understand what it was that I was doing, because the final change came when I realized that I'd had enough of being me. I had enough of being me. You want to know when you're going to change? When you finally had enough of being you. It, honest to God, is that simple. And you can't bring that about, but you can see the need to study the self that makes the choices that it does, and then ties you to its choices. Do you know you can't have an attachment that didn't begin with a choice? I'm going back to the beginning of the talk. How many of you know you have attachments? Of an innumerable number, yes or no? I have so many attachments, I don't even know how many attachments I have, and I would never know until something comes along and threatens what I'm attached to. And only then, when something threatens what I'm attached to, do I have even the chance of seeing that I'm attached to something and dependent on it, and therefore live in perfect fear, so that I always don't want what threatens what I'm attached to, and I always blame the condition on the conflict, instead of seeing that identi-fixation is conflict with everyone and everything. That's what it is. You have no conflict with life. No hatred, enmity, no regret, no fear, without being identi-fixed, without being fixed on some sense of self that, listen to me, judging yourself is a form of what? Identi-fixation. Say it. Anger towards other is what? Oh, I'm the worst person in the world. Now, bringing this to a close, there's no such thing as trying not to be identified. That was the point of the story. I couldn't get enough of this. I couldn't get enough of not this. The real problem was I needed to have enough of myself to see I don't want any more of me. Now, how can I know in the moment when I need to that the time has come, as the man said to his friend, that I've had enough of me? How do I know when I've had enough of me? Do I know I've had enough of me when me is making another choice? Do I? No. Why? Because all I see is what that me is making the choice for. I just see an opposite. Identi-fixation is a sense of self that is connected to and attached to an image that was brought about by a desire in some moment when a former image was threatened. Like, if I had a little more of this, I wouldn't be insecure. And so I get a little more of this, I'm still insecure. I think to myself, if I could just get everybody to recognize and maybe throw some palm fronds down on the ground when I'm walking, if I could just get everybody to see I am an incarnation of, not quite purely divine, but I'm close. People don't see it. You ever say to yourself, people don't love me? People don't appreciate me. I remember my mother used to go, Poor little Geisy. Poor little Geisy. Nobody loves him. How well did she know? And how could she know that, even though she didn't know that, right? If there's no such thing as trying not to be identified, because that's the answer to us, isn't it? Well, now you've clarified this, Mr. Finley. The problem is identification. So from this point on, I'm no longer going to be fixated on anything. and not only does it not change this machinery, but the very attempt to try not to be identified is then to summarily either approve of yourself because you happen to get through that particular moment, or to hate yourself because you couldn't do the choice that you imagined that if you could, you wouldn't be in conflict anymore. So not only has the conflict not come to an end between you and life that you think is set against you, but now you're in conflict with yourself because you can't live up to the image you've given yourself as someone who at last is going to let go and let God. Where does it leave us? Where does it leave us? Where does all of this leave us? Anybody? If I'm ever going to realize that I've had enough of me, one must lose their life to gain it. If I'm ever going to get to the point where I understand I've had enough of me, God help me, I'm going to have to be all of me. I have to be all of me. There can't be a me and a you that I blame me, that I blame you for me. There can't be a me and the moment that somehow or other is ruining everything. The experience of the moment, does it belong to the moment, or is the experience of it me? And if the experience of the moment is one that I summarily resist, I can begin to suspect that I couldn't resist it unless I wanted something else from the moment. So who is this me that I've had enough of? This body of desire, this endless series of wants and not wants, this certainty that somehow or other the conflict I feel is because of the condition I'm in. So the exercise to ever get to the point of where you're able to inwardly, you know what, I've had enough of me right now. Wouldn't that be, how many of you know people where you wish they would say to themselves, I've had enough of me right now? Because then you'd be you. Because they finally see everything's fine. Had enough of me. How do I have enough of me? Let me not lie to myself about the moment itself. I'm agitated, I'm angry, I'm frightened, I'm resistant, I'm full of impatience. That pain never appears without a finger pointing to something that if you could change it would free you of that conflict, doesn't it? You know that old story, you point with one finger and three fingers are pointing back at you, right? Use that idea. Catch yourself pointing to something as the source of your pain, and then have the courage, the right courage to realize, could I be in this kind of pain without a demand that I came into the moment with before it? And the answer is I can't. So that's what it means. Let me see all of me, not just what I see and don't see. Let me see all of me. And then all for one for all the lessons we've been having, the knower will disappear because at last you'll connect the knower with the, what's the key word, the hyphenated word? Identi-fixation. And then God help you, and he will, if you suffer that moment. Instead of trying to escape the suffer through another choice, do we not try to escape our suffering through choices? When you see this, let the chooser die. Not because you want to, but because you see that unless you let that chooser die, you are going to continue to live its life and be crucified by its choices that it hides through the way in which it blames everything for the pain it's in. Let's take a break. We'll come back and have our dialogue.
Welcome back, everyone. We are going to get started with our class again. It's now time for our Q&A with Guy. So if you're online, you can go to any of the chat boxes, whichever platform you're on. Go ahead and write your question in the chat box. And Kate's behind the scene. Even if you have a comment, also if there's something going on in your life that you'd like Guy's insight on, raise your hand and ask a question. We'd love to hear from you. Just one quick announcement. This Saturday, we have our monthly work party. And it would be great if you could come up to Merlin, Oregon and join us. We do a work party at about 9:30 in the morning. Then we go to a 12:30 p.m. lunch. And then we have a live discussion with Guy at 1:30. That if you cannot join us live, you can go onto Facebook and YouTube and join us there. So if you can join us for that either in person or live, we would love to see you. And I think we can go ahead and get started. Guy had a few comments before we start our Q&A.
Life is relationship. There's no self without relationship, which means that all said and done, relationship is self. There is an order of self in this broader relationship that we know so little about, that cannot act against itself because it would never act against itself. And yet we are forever and always acting against ourselves and others, which means we're in the wrong relationship with life. Now, how do I know I'm in the wrong relationship with life? If you're angry, if you're frightened, if you're worried, if you're anxious, if you're full of regrets, you are in the wrong relationship with life. Because the life that you're in relationship with is inseparable from what? Identi-fixation, this sense of self. Have you ever, I'm 75 years old. I don't watch a lot of news as a rule. I'm not a follower of this or that. I don't follow anything. I, in my life, have never seen the depth and breadth, the violence of the intolerance that exists today. No political group can tolerate any other group. Shut them down, kill them, get rid of them, control it. Get reins in your hands and run rampant over anyone and everything that doesn't see life the way you do. I've never seen the religious intolerance that I see today. Never. We're once again, I should say, on the verge of war. And what is every war, what is the source of every war? Identi-fixation. It's as simple as this. I like golf, most of you know it. I step up on the tee box to hit a shot. I feel free until I stand over the ball. And then what happens? Identi-fixation. Something is afraid that it is going to do what it doesn't want to do, and the more it doesn't want to do what it doesn't want to do, the more what? It does the thing it doesn't want. Identi-fixation, where without knowing it, instead of something going before me to make the crooked places straight, I live from a crooked mind filled with conflict produced by comparing the moment to what it should be, and when it's not, I resist the moment and I am trapped again in what? Identi-fixation. I know for a fact that most of you can't have fun. Unless you're drinking or drugging or somehow or other in some atmosphere where the energy allows you to let loose, you're about as much fun as a stick in the mud. And you know how you can know you're a stick in the mud? Because you don't have fun by yourself. If you can't have fun by yourself, you can't have fun with anybody. Why can't I have fun? Why can't I just have fun? Kids have fun pretty much by themselves, don't they? Why can't I want to have fun. I don't want to have to drink to have fun. I don't want to have to go to a party to have fun. I want to have fun. I want to have fun. Why can't I have fun? What's the word? measuring everything, comparing everything. I can't be like that. I can't just get up and do that. I can't just get up and sing. I just can't get up and be free. Are you kidding? Why can't I be free? Are you getting it?
Okay. We're going to start with our first question from Michael. I want to remind all of you on GoToWebinar, if you are on that platform and you'd like to speak to Guy directly, please raise your hand. There's a little hand icon. Raise your hand there, and we will bring you into the conversation. Michael wrote, I want to write about joy. The joy in the words are joy. The peace in the message is joy. The connection with Guy and the staff at Life of Learning is joy. More joy, more peace, more love. Guy has defined the human condition challenges very clearly. Ask Guy for me to define what solutions we can bring to increase the joy and peace and love, not only inside us, but in the world. Thank you, Michael.
Well, actually, Michael, if you've tuned into the talk, I just spent an hour, but I will sharpen it a little bit. What is joy? What is joy?
The absence of pain. Absence of me.
Well, the true answer is the absence of me, but that's confusing to people, I think. I'll go at it negatively, meaning not darkly, but to define and refine the question. I go to a party and I'm expecting to have some joy. Now, the party that I'm going to, that I'm expecting this joy, what's the nature of this joy I'm expecting at the party? The party hasn't happened yet. What's this joy that I think of? I think of Christ, and I think of the joy of Christ, the joy of the living word, the joy of life, the joy of the staff at Life of Learning. The joy that I'm looking for is what steals my joy. Because I come in with an established idea and sensation of self that I'm looking to reconfirm, and when you don't act out what it is that confirms what is joy to me, am I joyous? No. I'm judging you. It's so difficult, you know, it is. I see things and I want you to. If you want joy, you'll never know it. But it doesn't mean that you shouldn't long for joy. If I'm identified with any word, what is the word joy other than a past experience or something that I've assigned to it through some happy moment, and that's joy. Now I take that joy into the room with me, and then Eric unfolds the tablecloth the wrong way. Where's my joy? It's out the window, isn't it? It's been substituted now with what? Some kind of suffering that I want to blame on Eric because he's not filled with the joy that I know he should be filled with. I'm being facetious, but you get the idea. But I come home and there's Frankie the turkey on my deck. Not on my deck. He's taken to lay down on the mat in front of the sliding glass door now and just look inside and go like that. He's become a friend. As best a turkey can be a friend to somebody. Honestly, he's become a friend. I can go out and I go, Frankie, like that. Frankie will come running. I know he's not coming because he likes me. He's coming because he knows that means some food's going to be out pretty soon. But I don't care. I don't. I enjoy Frankie's company. There's a kind of joy in Frankie's company. Now, Frankie has a few drawbacks, some of which I can't go into, but let's just put it this way. I have to hose that mat off 3 times a day. Do I resent Frankie when I'm hosing that off? No. What did that lovely person in Shadowland say to C.S. Lewis when he was sitting there having a nice picnic with her and depressed because she was going to die and they knew it? What did she say to him? Anybody? Ellen.
The pain then is part of the happiness now.
The pain to come is part of the happiness now. Now, there's either joy in seeing that or there's not. Joy is part of the relationship and the revelation of the interaction of whatever is involved in that moment, or it's not. And if you come into any moment looking for joy or looking for happiness or looking for security, you come in with a want or a not want, yes or no? Can there be a want or a not want prior to the moment without some form of what? Identi-fixation. There is no joy in identi-fixation unless what I'm fixated with is what I want. And the minutes it's not, I don't have joy. I hope that helps a little bit.
Okay, we're going to go to a question from Sindasani.
One fast thing. At the end, Michael asks, so that there might be joy and peace not only in us, but in the world. Clearly, there's an absence of joy in the world, isn't there? How did the world become so bereft, such a paucity of joy in the world? How did that happen? Because the people before us? Well, certainly they're complicit. But what of the people that continue what came before us? Believing that their choices are other than the choices made by the people who came before us. Do you think your choices are different than the people who came before you? You do. And you know what makes you convinced that your choices are different than your parents and their parents and their parents? Is because you're identified with the choice you make, and it sets you against anyone that doesn't choose in the same way. And that's what this world is. It is a consciousness unseen, unaware of itself, choosing against itself, believing that with every choice it makes to free itself, it actually is going to accomplish that. When every choice it makes to free itself with, it's identified with and attached to, and will kill anyone that threatens what it is identified with and attached to. And that's the world we're in. And there is no joy in that world, even though that world is unfolding in a world that is joy itself, which is creation, which is the divine. Now we can go on.
Sindasani asks, hello again.
Hi, Sindasani.
I have a question about one of Guy's talks. He mentioned that being in the present moment can cancel what we think is bound to happen. Could Guy please elaborate on this further?
I want to. Do you understand his question? I'll phrase it for you. He's saying, I've heard you say that here I am. We just talked about this to some extent. Here I am. I'm going to put myself back on the tee box. For those of you who don't know, a tee box is not where T comes in. That's T-E-A. A tee box is T-E-E, and it stands for the place where you hit your first shot on every hole. Tee box. I'm on the tee box. I haven't had a particularly good round. That means I stink. I'm not striking well. And if I am, which I won't be, negative. I'm negative because why? Because I'm not getting the joy out of the game I expect to when I hit it well. If I don't hit it well, there's no joy. This makes sense to people. And if I don't hit it well, then every time I get ready to hit it again, I'm standing there. Am I more confident? Yes or no? What am I feeling? Anxiety, the absence of confidence, no joie de vivre, no joy on the tee box. Why? Because the past is crucifying the present, isn't it? So now he's asked, all right, Guy, I wish you wouldn't have scrolled down to the next question. Can I go back to it? Yes, I can. How is it that being in the present moment can cancel what we think is bound to happen? What do I think is bound to happen if the past is crucifying the present? What do I think is going to happen? Past is going to repeat itself. Come on, this is important. The past is going to repeat itself. How do I know? Something's telling me it will. And it makes the choice to try to protect me from the thing it says it doesn't want. And the more it tries to protect me, the more identi-fixation is taking place, the more fixed I am and I get ready to swing. Can this swing? Even if you don't know golf, you know that won't work. How many of you want to dance with somebody that's like this? So if I'm aware in the present moment that something in me is identified with what happened a moment before or 50 years ago, then in that moment, that awareness brings a new observer into the field of awareness. And the new observer, by the fact of its entrance into the moment, changes to whatever extent it can be there as a light that ordinarily would let something never happen and allows something new to happen. Even if what is new, Sindasani, is that I see with greater clarity the pain of identi-fixation. How else am I going to have enough of me? Do you know how you get good at anything? When you've had enough of being someone who's trying to get good at it. That's when you get good at something. You bring everything you can to bear, and then when you see everything you've brought to bear is produced by choices that moment is making for you within yourself, you begin to be open to new choices. Like, I wonder what happened if instead of being afraid, I just let go and just swung as freely as I could. I wonder what happened. Now you're going to get some new data. Now new possibilities are present, because instead of you trying to protect yourself, you see the futility of as the past tries to crucify the present, you see the futility. I can't be like that. I've had enough of me. Do you see it? Yes. Is that clear enough, do you think, for Sindasani? Okay, good.
Okay, and anyone in the room, if you'd like to come up and share, we'd love to hear from you as well. Okay, we have a question from Carl. Be a thought dropper. Carl must be dropping thought and trying to remain present over 100 times or more a day. It nearly seems like a task, the whole exercise of being a thought dropper and working to remain present. It feels uncomfortable, and it actually feels like it's taking me out of the flow of my daily activities, because I'm in a constant loop of drop thought, don't be identified, drop, drop, drop.
Well, I wish all of my students were like that. Because I'll tell you what comes out of that level of consciousness where one is forever trying to become what they imagine they're meant to be through their work. The absolute futility of trying to become anything at all. Is it joyous or painful to try to become something? Anybody? Now, are you just saying that because you think I'm asking for that answer? Or have you seen to some extent that what I suffer from and judge myself over is my failure to act out the choices that I think are going to lead to my liberation? Because I know the choices to make now. Do you not know the choices to make? I'm starting to feel anxious. Well, let's see, a new choice would be to see I can't be anxious without identi-fixation. In order to be anxious, I have to be fixated on something that shouldn't be, or that should be happening the way I've imagined it. So I can start to see this pain, this stress is intimately connected with imagination. Now, I never knew that imagination came into resistance because there's nothing more real than this resistance I feel. Yes or no? Now I have a new understanding. And I must, as he's doing, what's Carl coming to? If you've gotten far enough, here's what he's coming to. This thing that I'm trying to find life in is killing me. But on the other hand, I can't stop. Because I don't understand yet what I need to understand. So where is he? He's in this crucible where this side isn't it and that side's not it. And I vacillate between this side and that side. Now, Carl, one day you'll understand. Your work isn't taking you out of the flow. Your work is beginning to show you that there is a time where one can flow. If you're in practical thought, you're doing your work. You want to go have a nice time. Doesn't mean that you should go to sleep, but it means you understand. For instance, when you play golf, you should never play a round unless it's a dedicated round of practicing. You should never try to practice during a round. You're dead meat. Because you're in thought. You're protecting or trying to prove with a swing what you believe is the fact of your game. You go out there and you try to do your finish. You're dead meat. You're done. Why? Because there's no freedom in identi-fixation. On the other hand, when you go practice, practice. When you do your spiritual work, do your spiritual work. And when you're not doing your spiritual work, allow yourself to not do your spiritual work, but keep in the back of your mind that at all times, the basis of your life must be the wish to do your spiritual work. Then you can be in the flow and free, let things go, have a nice time. People think, for instance, that like one of the things that's fun when you're playing golf is that you get to tease the other players. No, that's fun, as long as it's not cruel. But spiritual people don't tease, do they? No, they don't. Spiritual people, they're very serious people. They catch themselves getting ready to tease. They go, no, I'm not going to tease. The minute I feel a bit of fun coming up in me, I go, no, that's not fun. And how do I know it's not fun? Because I'm not having any fun at all right now. You just have to find your way. You have to find your way. You need right ideas. You need things to practice and look at. But in the end, this whole idea of my being identified with drop, 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 drop. Because here's where he's at. I want to rock. I want to drop, drop, drop. But I can't stop, stop, stop. Drop, drop, drop. I can't stop, stop, stop. I can't stop, stop, stop. Drop, drop, drop. That's fun for me. I don't care about you. Well, Jesus, if I can't stop, stop, stop with the drop, 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 and I can't drop, drop, drop this whole business, what's going to happen to me? And for the first time, a person starts to realize that what they call their will isn't will at all. It's a form of desire and attachment to an outcome. That's what you call will. That's not will at all. Will is that which will release you from these opposites. Will is what reveals the opposites in play, and as it's clear to you that they're the yes and the no, the want and the not want, the stop and the drop, it becomes one thing. You're saved because you can't identify anymore. It doesn't mean that the impetus to wish to be a different kind of human being goes away, because that you didn't put that in you in the first place. It just means now there's something new that allows you to see something new.
Okay, we have a question from Ashton, and just so you know, there's 3 more after this one. Ashton says, motivation to do this work seems paradoxical. Mm-hmm. The self that wants to do the work seems to be the same self that dies from it. The larger self doesn't seem to need it. Where does the motivation come? And how does one build the motivation to continue this work? Also, I've been a long-time listener and reader. Words really can't express my thanks. Sincerely, thank you, Ashton.
I love this question. It's also evident that Ashton has done some work. Meaning he's beginning to see, OMG, this thing is an unending paradox. How many of you know what a paradox is? It's either two mallards all right, okay, all right. David liked it, and that's all that matters to me. The self that wants to do the work seems to be the same self that dies from it. So I'm doing all of this to get to the end of myself, so that when I get to the end of myself, it's the end of myself. Who's left? Who's on first? What's moving me? Because I can see here I am. And you have to, listen to me, desire is ambition. But the true ambition hidden in every desire is for that opposite to complete itself through it imagines it will do it. That's what ambition is. I'm empty, I want to be full. I'm not free, I want to be free. That's ambition. Because you can't separate becoming from the ambition to escape or to otherwise be what you've imagined. Can you get that much? So here I am, and I'm spiritually ambitious. And I wish that more of you were ambitious spiritually. Honest to God, I do. Some of you are the most boring. You don't be here just for the ride. This isn't entertainment. You'll go soon enough, but maybe if I express that vehemently enough, you'll go sooner. This is about you seeing, working. Carl was not Carl saying, I don't understand. I'm working. I want to bring an end to this self that can't stop. And I'm doing it by this idea of drop. Isn't that what Carl was saying? But in the end, what is it that can't stop? It's the same thing that can't stop dropping. It's one nature that I don't understand. And what's the paradox? How can I be both of these people that on one hand wants to drop and the other hand can't stop? Isn't it a paradox that something in me is endlessly motivated to wake up, but when and this is an extrapolation on his part, although he may see some of it, all of my work to wake up is bringing an end to the me that's going to wake up. What in the name of God is going on? Who's doing this? And that's where you begin to remand yourself over. You stop trying to be spiritual. Because you've seen the only thing that's trying to be spiritual is clinging to something that says this is what spirituality is, and that means to drop. Try to see it, this thing runs in big circles, I know it does. How would I know that I can't drop unless I try to drop? Could I ever know that the me that's going to drop is absolutely powerless unless I go all the way to the end of that power of imagined drop? And then if I see that, what happens to that me? Because this is what Ashton is saying. What happens to that me that sees I can't drop? What happens to it? I've had enough of that. But the love that started this journey remains in place. Only now that love, that true joy, is no longer masked and covered up by something that this personality identified with so that it could know its path and find its way to paradise by making the right choices. So it's absolutely a paradox, Ashton. The larger self doesn't seem to need it. Now here's what he's saying there. He's saying, there's been a few times, maybe you've been there, where I realize that I've had enough of me. But sometimes when I've had enough of me, I'm just sitting there and there's nothing of me. I'm nothing. I'm not going anywhere. I've got nothing to do. I don't want to do anything. There's just this big zero. I can tell by most of your faces you haven't reached that point, but you will. Because you've actually begun to reap the real reward of your spiritual work, which is the end of becoming. The end of becoming is the end of identification, because you can't separate identification from becoming. Are they not synonymous? So I've actually worked to come to the end of becoming, and now there's like nothing, because there's no me left to become something. But there's parts, there's residue of me, and it says, you can't just sit here and be a zucchini. You can't just sit here in this consoling silence. You can't just do that. And because you don't know yet that emptiness is self-settling, that it's self-fulfilling, you're then moved on to the next iteration of whatever it is that mind says you have to do. Or maybe you just have practical things that have to get done that day. And so suddenly you're there, then you're out there, and now you're gone. And then you get home, and you can't remember anything about the you that wasn't you anymore. You just have to find your way. Maybe that's all I'm going to do for the next whatever number of years I have to live. I'm just going to come sit here, and I'm going to go, you have to find your way. I would love to do that. But part of finding our way requires seeing what is in our way and developing faith in what shows us what's in our way. That's the best I can do for Ashton.
Okay, we have a question from Annette. What if there are some behaviors that people we're in a relationship with have that we find not to be okay or is a non-negotiable for us? It's tough to address calmly, but we try to, and things don't seem to change. Or maybe there is some headway or growth on both sides. Maybe it's our behavior that changes things more than our words, but then sometimes a discussion is necessary.
And that, just for you to know, Wednesday night I'm going to go into this very deeply. How many of you, as I remind you, be awake, have a relationship with someone that maybe they're alive, maybe they're not? You don't think about them during the day, but then something will happen. Song will come on the radio, bit of news. You see someone dressed a certain way or walking a certain way. You hear a tone somebody uses with you, and just like that, you are at odds with somebody in your life, alive or dead, and you can't stop thinking about them. Yes or no? People that hurt you in your life, maybe they're not even here anymore. Oh, but the thought of them comes back up. The thought of the way that person spoke to me in that business meeting. Who do they think they are? Yes or no? Identi-fixation. The strangest paradox in the whole world is that I can't wait to give my attention to something that as I give it to it, I hate the experience of giving my attention to it. How do you explain that? How do you explain, Annette, that you can't let go of the very thing that as you cling to it brings up this conflict in you? I'm telling you why. Because there is some identi-fixation. I am fixated in some idea about how they should be, or how I should be, or how that relationship should be, because there's no joy in it. There's just anger and irritation in it. And I blame all of the anger and irritation I feel on people who come to me already filled with anger and irritation. Yes or no? Annette, I know you want to be free. Just see as clearly as you can one day that any time that you can't let go of a thought or a relationship, it isn't because it's holding on to you, it's because something in you is clinging to it for dear life. And the life that it's clinging to is not your life, Annette. It belongs to a life that died a long time ago and that keeps itself alive by, what are the words? That's the answer.
Okay, a question from Isabella. I'm asking the same question you've answered, I'm sure, a million different ways. But I've worked with this seeming conflict for years. I know that wanting something only creates more wanting. But what am I supposed to focus on that isn't connected with identi-fixation? I found that when I went to other extremes of not having any desire for anything and felt I was lost in a way. Can you relate to this? I realize I also can't try to always be in the moment. I just am. Then my mind says, are you? LOL.
These are good questions because they're indicative of a certain, I use the word carefully, progress does not mean to close the distance between things. We think of progress as I want to become this, I'm becoming more of that. That's not real progress. Real progress is the expansion of an understanding. So that you're really not progressing in time and space, you're progressing in something that is timeless, awaiting you to enter into it as you grow in that understanding. That's real progress. It is the development of wisdom that is already a part of yourself. So what Isabella is saying here is that I've worked for many years with this conflict of knowing that when I want something, it's not going to answer it. Most of you know that, don't you? Yeah, but I still want stuff. And I want more stuff, honestly, if I'm honest. I don't have enough stuff. Everybody wants more stuff. That's what a sweatshirt on planet Earth. I want more stuff. But stuff doesn't really fill me up. So now I'm going to not want stuff. How did that go? Most of us aren't even that far along. I realize stuff doesn't do it, so I'm not going to stuff myself with more ideas about stuff I want. But when I do that, I become a veritable vegetable, and that's not what I want. What am I supposed to do? That's what she's asking. Isabella, you know where I spoke in the beginning of this talk, and again before on last Sunday, I said there's another kind of knower. You all remember that? Where the action it takes is inseparable from the relationship in which it is brought to bear. Where the action it takes is inseparable from the movement of all the parts in that moment. That's the knower. One with the movement of things. Yes? Yes, please? Yes. That's what has to happen, Isabella. I'm damned if I choose, I'm damned if I don't choose. What am I supposed to do if I'm not making choices? How am I supposed to get through my day if I don't make choices? And this is where we look at where levels and scale gets confused. Because no one's telling you, look, you're out of bread, you got to make a choice, go to the market. Now you're standing in front of a shelf, by the grace of God, in the West that has 44,000 different kinds of bread on it. So now I don't know which bread to get. I want to go with the unhealthy bread. It makes better sandwiches, in my opinion. Hawaiian bread. But there's this whole wheat bread. But like you need a chainsaw to cut it. And I don't want to fight that hard to eat my sandwich. I'm just making this stuff up. Eat organically as best you can. Don't eat the crap. But I have to choose, don't I, between those two sandwiches. Now, do you have any idea why markets sell as much food as they do? Do you buy a lot of food at markets that you don't need when you go there? Yes or no? Do you know why? Because you're in pain shopping for what you need. I'm actually in pain, and the more pain I'm in, the more consolation I require. The more consolation, the more those cookies look good to me. I'm not making this up. You just don't see it. So the solution, to use that word, is that I need simply to be more and more present, not to judging myself for bad choices, and certainly not to figure out what the right choice is to make, but to watch the conflict in the chooser. Isn't the chooser the knower of the moment, please? Yes. We're coming to an end. Just a few more minutes, guys. Isn't the chooser the knower? But if the knower turns out to be the loser because of the choice it makes that it doesn't want, then is the chooser the knower, or is there a fake knower there saying, I know what to choose, and then I'm in conflict with what I did? What's the answer I'm trying to get to? Watch. Observe. And one big thing would be to start to realize, as difficult as it is, the whole of my life doesn't hinge on this choice. Do you not think, especially when you're pressured, that the whole of your life depends on this choice you're about to make? So where's all of my attention? Trying to satisfy the identification, the thing that's drawn to make that pressurized choice. Let me not be let me watch. That's as simple as it is. You have to find out for yourself. On we go.
Okay, this is our last question from Cinnamon Nerd on YouTube. He says, I apologize if the question is off topic. I can't get over how my girlfriend cheated on me with a bunch of guys during our 2-month short relationship. Now after that, she said she doesn't see me as a man. I can't stop looking at her new stories online and spend the whole summer thinking about her and I. I can't stop this cycle.
Well, actually, it's very much on topic, isn't it? I'm not going to call you Cinnamon Nerd. I'll call you CN. CN. You know there's something amiss. On one hand, I can't stop myself. On the other hand, I don't want to. On one hand, all I can do is picture the very thing that as I picture it, I'm punished by my own mind. What is that about, CN? Don't miss the big picture here. The big picture isn't what do I do to get her to come crawling back, to say I'm sorry, to stop. Is that the meaning of the word what does it mean to be trolled by something? I see that sometimes. Huh?
Yeah, it's like
When you're trolled, what does it mean to be trolled? Somebody's saying, denigrating you?
Following, you're trolling someone.
Negatively? Or is it,
Yeah,
yeah. Never mind. I shouldn't have asked. I didn't care to begin with. I care even less now. Just stay with your helplessness. Stay with your helplessness. Not with making choices how to help yourself out of a mind that is conflicted between what it wants and doesn't want. Is there anything more distasteful to this human life of ours than to stay helpless? Isn't everything about the choices we make to avoid being helpless? Yes or no? Yes or no? Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those that mourn. To stay helpless is the same as saying, I'm going to stay between this paradox of the fact that I want to drop, but I can't stop. To be helpless is to see the opposites at the same time instead of identifying with one or the other. Because when I identify with wanting her to be different, and the next thing I know, and you're not alone, CN, whether they'll admit it or not, there are people in this room, and I'll admit it myself, that during those times, especially when you fall for somebody hard, you're consumed by thinking about them. You want to know where they are, what they're doing, why they're doing it, and are they thinking about me at all? That's all that's there in this nascent form of desire. You can see there's something wrong here. What's wrong isn't what she did, although it would be nice if she didn't. What's wrong isn't that she's denigrating you to other people, saying you're not a man. What's wrong is that you don't know whether you're a man or not, because if you knew you were a real man, it wouldn't matter what anybody said to you. That's the life we want here, CN. If you want that, you can use this moment as valuable as it is, and it's immensely valuable. But try to take the treasure out of it instead of letting it torment you the way it is.
Is there any students that would like to come up? Kate's going to come up, and then we have Heidi.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kate. Okay, so this morning, well, you know, everybody has their morning routine, right? The things that you kind of do in your breakfast and all sorts of stuff. So, of course, Eric and I have our morning routine and have a special one for Sunday, or yes, today's Sunday. Get through all of that, you know, sitting down, drinking our little drink, and Eric says to me,
Uh-oh. Fold the tablecloth from the right to the left.
well, I was surprised that that was so disturbing, by the way.
Yeah.
I can give you a lot more better ones than that.
I'm sure you can.
He said, I'll bet I can say one word that will make you jump up right away. Now, what do you suppose goes through me?
You just jumped.
There was definitely an interior jump. My mind, and what was cool was that I actually felt it and was watching, like right at that moment. But my mind instantly went to identi-fixation, right? Thinking in the negative, like,
Yes.
I forgot something. What did I forget? Like I try to break myself of this habit with Eric and with others of when they come up to me before they say anything, a lot of times I say, what did I forget? In a preemptive manner. And so he's like, it's not bad. And then the one word he said was friends. And what he meant by that is we have we have deer that come into our yard, and I like to go out and feed them. And the way he tells me that they're there, if he sees them, is, oh, you have some friends outside, right? So that the one word was friends to let me know that my friends, the deer, were outside, and he knew that I would want to jump up immediately and go feed them. So I just wanted to give that example, especially what Guy said in the talk. You need to see something like you need to see the need to study yourself, and that's just, for me, like just one little perfect example. I mean, I can give you 489 throughout my day, but that's just one little example of the need to study oneself and what the difference it makes when you actually start to see these things move in you and realize that you don't have to do whatever movement they're telling you to do. So
Yes.
It was good.
What she's saying, in other words, is that the way that we are, meaning a sleeping human being, is that now there's a reaction, and then the reaction makes the choices for us, so that what's reacting, which is the past, with its identi-fixation, it wants to simply free itself from the very reaction that it had, where the real choice isn't to let the reaction choose for you. The real and first choice is to be the student of the reaction, so that you understand something about this identi-fixation when it comes up. That's the path to liberty, and there's joy in that.
Hello, my name is Heidi, and my example goes along very well with Kate's. I was driving in my car from home to the grocery store, and somebody was behind me, and that's kind of rare, when you live in the boonies, it's just you. And this car was going pretty fast, pretty close, pretty aggressive for a short amount of time. And obviously we're going the same direction, and that wasn't going to change. And that little disturbance, that little push revealed landmines inside of myself. I thought, how could I possibly go from cruising and feeling fine to pushed, then pressured, then intimidated, then just thought after thought trying to solve a feeling of driving down the road. So very much along the lines of Guy's talk, that I don't realize that there's a body of very disturbed, very reactive selves, identificators inside of me. And that's actually my present condition. That is actually the present condition of this nature. And it seems as though it's the man's fault that was driving behind me, maybe too close for my comfort, but that is not the case. It's really clear to me that that nature is active in Heidi all the time. Over a dish, over a comment, it could be anything. So it's clearly not those things, but there's a lot more work. I don't know, maybe just a different quality of observing myself that would reveal
Yes.
the truth. And then from seeing the truth of myself, then there could be a different level of interaction instead of just instantaneously trying to get away from what seems to have pushed a button. That's actually my present state of existence.
There can be no discovery in the measurement of any moment. There can be no discovery in the measurement of any moment, and that's what this mind does instantaneously without your cooperation. It measures the moment, it tells you what the measurement is, and then out of that comes thoughts to rebalance the moment according to that identified self.
My name is Eric, and connected to what God just said, Shakespeare said that present fears are less than horrible imaginings. And just as an aside to that is, I think it's funny that that's from Macbeth, maybe the most famous play in the history of the world, one of them. And Shakespeare, one of the most beloved writers in the history of the world, beloved by a lot of people, but nobody's listening. Nobody's actually listening to what he said. It's like just entertainment. And so present fears are less than horrible imaginings. And I'm relating this a lot to my, eye condition. But another example is like, have you ever been in like a traffic situation or some crisis situation where in traffic, driving, you had to make a fast maneuver or something. You had to do something because there was danger, and you just did it. Something in you just did it, no problem, you can move on. But then right away, something comes in and it starts talking to you and says things like, what if I had hit that person? What if I hadn't done this or that? What if this or that had happened? So the fear is in the imagination. It's in the negative imagination. It's not even in the present moment.
Correct.
And this goes on with my eyes, the last 5 months with my surgeries and whatnot, is I can see now, and everything's fine now, for the most part. But where I get into trouble is going into imagination of what's going to happen to me. That's where the real fear comes in. I guess I'll stop there. I kind of started rambling, but that's it.
Hi, my name is David, and I just got up not knowing exactly what I wanted to say, except to express some thanks for this talk and for the opportunity to just be here. In this atmosphere, and to be privy, and John used that word privilege, to be, I can't remember the context exactly, but a few weeks ago you used that word, and I remember a response in me that said privilege. I'm not sure if I'd use that word. It's going a bit far. But that's not far enough, really, to express the meaning of being able to hear these principles expressed with the amount of energy and clarity So I'm very thankful.
Are you headed this way? Okay, class dismissed.
Hi, everyone. I'm Deborah. I just wanted to say that I've been seeing a nature inside of me that loves the things that it's fixated on. Identification. She loves it. I've seen how these thoughts will well up inside of me. You've heard Guy tell stories about being taken down a dark alley and then getting beat up. And I see the two of them, and I know I'm being tempted to go down. And there's something in us, in me, that just wants to go there. Don't make me, I always get beat up when I'm there. And to start to see that this fixation, I don't even know how to say it, that it really has a hold on us and something doesn't want to let it go. I think perhaps is the beginning of letting it go, because then you can start to see that there's a choice. I feel like I'm rambling now, but to start to see the stark difference, how something just wants to take you there, is incredible to me.
With the last word, you know what a koan is in Eastern traditions. It's something when the mind is posed a question's posed to the mind that the mind can't grasp the answer to. And it can't grasp the answer, like if a tree falls in the wood, does it make a sound? It can't grasp the answer to that, because in order to grasp the answer to that, the mind that is asked the question has to transcend its own understanding. That's the only way it can transcend, is by rising above the mind that only works in opposites. True koans are questions that produce in the mind this quandary where I can think about it. If I come, well, this is true, but it's also true here, and vacillate back and forth. Only when the pain of the vacillation becomes clear is the answer to the koan in that clarity. Because the clarity is always the end of the questioner and the end of the question, because they're seen as a singularity, not a duality. And to that I say that this problem of why do I do the good I don't want to do is a koan. But it doesn't become a real question until you see, you know what, I can't stop doing what I know I shouldn't, even though I ought not do that. I don't do the good I would, I do the evil I would not. St. Paul was presenting something for anybody far enough along the road, a koan. How can I do the good that I shouldn't, that I would, and do the what I don't want to do? Bad. You understand? How's that possible? It isn't I at all who is doing either one of these things. But to see it isn't I at all is to invoke another I, isn't it? The real seeing I. Goodbye.